This is the Brandon Smith Show. I am your host, Brandon Smith, and the entire purpose of the show is one singular thing, and that is to help you live a life that much more free from dysfunction. Who doesn't want that? So our topic today is a really great one. So we're in the spirit of giving, and in the spirit of giving, we naturally think about what are some nonprofits that we can give to, and in fact, what kind of do nonprofits really do? And so I've got an awesome guest for us today, Justin Miller. Justin, thanks for having me.
Brandon.
Thanks for me having you today.
Thank you for having me today.
Right out of the gate, I've already screwed this up, folks. So bear with us. I promise it only gets better from here. So Justin's the CEO of Care for AIDS. And Justin, you and I have kind of known each other for a little while now. We've kind of bumped around. And I would love for you to educate me and also our listeners today on what it's been like to start a nonprofit, because you've had this unique experience. You've both started this thing from scratch, and now you lead it. So you can give us some perspective on not only what's it like to lead a nonprofit, but even when we're thinking about how do we give to nonprofits, how do we support the nonprofits, what that might look like. So before we go down all that nitty gritty, tell us a little about your story. How'd you get doing this?
Well, it was the last thing that I expected. We have a few things in common in our story. We both went to Vanderbilt University.
Go Doors. I got to say that. Go Doors.
So I was at Vanderbilt with these aspirations to go into the marketplace, and I was studying along that vein and pursuing that as my direction in life. And I was interested in social causes, but I never thought that I would give my life to work on one of these issues. And out of nowhere, I was hit with this opportunity and this issue that confronted me, and I felt that I had a responsibility to do something about it. And that all came about because I heard a challenge from Bono, actually, the lead singer of U2,
Yeah.
and hearing him challenge really the faith community in the U.S. to say, hey, this generation is going to be largely defined by this issue of HIV and AIDS. And this community of churches in the U.S. have not responded as they need to address this issue. And your absence is noticeable, and we need you to engage on this front. And I was 18 at the time when I was hearing this challenge. So you can imagine that I felt outmanned and outgunned when it came to addressing an issue that was affecting 40 million people around the world. And at that time, I didn't even imagine that there would be an organization birthed from this. But there was some part of me that was feeling challenged that I needed to understand this issue. I was part of the large majority of the U.S. that was pretty ignorant about this issue and had not really dealt with understanding the implications of it. And so I decided that I was going to get a team together and we were going to go to Africa.
And this was while you were still a student?
I was at Vanderbilt. Okay. I was a rising junior, and I thought, what is 1 month out of one summer to put my plans on hold and to go and take a look and see what I can find about this issue called HIV and AIDS. And little did I know that was going to change the trajectory of my life forever.
So that one trip, really, after that, you said, this. I want to keep doing more of this. Did you know after that trip, I'm going to make this my vocation, or was it mostly just it sparked something in you wanted to pursue?
When I left on that trip, the only objective was to produce a documentary. We wanted to produce a film that could be used to come back and tell a larger audience about the story of HIV and AIDS. And I thought I will work on this film, and I will return to my junior year in college, and I will proceed with my life as if nothing really had ever happened. And on that trip, a few things happened. I won't have time today to go into all the details of that, but the main moment, the main breakthrough that happened on that trip is I met 2 Kenyan national leaders and pastors who had such a phenomenal story, and they had been very personally impacted by this issue of HIV and AIDS. And a lot of people, most people in Africa had, but these guys were unique. They were special. I believe that this meeting could only be described as a divine appointment, because these 2 guys had a passion and a calling to see the church throughout East Africa mobilized to address this issue. And, if you don't know much about this issue in Africa, it's not just needing access to medication. It's that there is this weight of discrimination and stigma that causes this issue to be so much more devastating than just not having access to medication. And they envisioned the church being that light and that voice that could really changed the narrative about HIV in that part of the world. And I was just so captivated by their vision. And I had seen people there on the ground. I had met countless individuals, Pamela, Nora. I mean, these faces are still as vivid today as they were 10 years ago. And I just felt compelled that I had to be a part of this somehow. And so I offered my help to team up with these two guys named Cornell and Duncan and support them however I could. And at that time, I still believed that my support would just be kind of a modest amount of financial support, a little bit of advocacy here and there, but what that would eventually grow into founding this organization, Care for AIDS, and now spending a decade trying to help people live a life beyond AIDS, because that is really what happens in that part of the world, is that AIDS is really seen as the end of my life, not just physically, but socially, spiritually, emotionally. And all of our programs are designed to help really parents living with HIV realize their full potential beyond that diagnosis.
Wow.
And helping them be able to live a life where they can be that providing and productive parent to take care of their kids and really strengthening the family. And what started off as just this little interest on the side has now become this all-consuming passion of mine that has really driven me for the past decade.
So I want to go back. So I love that. I love hearing what you're doing today. And I'm going to go back a little bit in your story. So now you've graduated. Okay, you graduated from Vanderbilt and you've made this decision. All right, I'm doing this. I'm starting this thing. What was going through your head at that time? And what did you start with first? So for those people thinking about, gosh, I might one day want to start a nonprofit, where did you start and what did you learn in that experience?
Well, I think maybe people perceive that starting a nonprofit is a very glamorous thing, and there's great fulfillment in my work, but it is a hard calling. And I would never tell people to run from that, but I would say, you really need to understand that, do you feel so strongly that this thing that is happening in the world today cannot and should not exist anymore, that I am going to be willing to pour my entire...
For people listening, Justin's like clenching his fist as he's saying it. It's really awesome.
And
I could see how passionate you are about this.
And that's what inspires entrepreneurs, is either there's something that should be, that we need to make true, or there's something that really shouldn't be this way and we need to fix it. And I think for me, that knowledge of HIV and the seeing it firsthand was the thing that continued to drive me through 10 years of some really high points, but largely working and grinding working on an issue that has largely fallen out of really favor and attention in the world's eye, and trying to bring attention to something that's really unpopular and serving a group of people that is not something that people typically think about. So, when I came out of college, thankfully at 22 years old, I wasn't like betting the farm on this project because I didn't have much to lose, but it was a huge risk, and obviously my own personal pride and ego. What if I fail? What if this doesn't work? But I think if I was anybody that was starting a nonprofit, I would say the first thing you have to do is you really have to understand the need that exists, and you have to understand the context in which that need does exist. Because it's just like in a business. You first need to understand your customer and what do they want and what can you offer of value to them. And so many times we see something and we think that's a good idea, so let's create a nonprofit around it. But we don't really understand how inserting ourselves into that situation could bring benefit, but it could also do harm in that situation. So, and that first trip to Kenya was step one, like understand the context and that we will be working in to do that.
I want to go back a little bit. Say a little bit more about that, because I think most people think, well, gosh, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
So I would only be helping, right?
Right. Yeah. It's such a big topic, because so much of what we want to do is not, and this goes into a much larger conversation about kind of how we see the world and how we see poverty. In my mind, and in our world, in our context in the US, we think of poverty as just lacking material possessions. And if you believe that is your worldview, then you solve that problem by giving people material possessions. And in the process of doing that, you sometimes, I believe it's all with the best of intentions, but you sometimes can rob people of dignity because they feel lesser, because they're in a subservient place to you as the giver and the receiver. You can come into a community and you can change the incentive structure where you put people out of business unintentionally because you've now provided a free service that they were making a living off of. You can just change the dynamic so quickly. And I think, part of what Care for AIDS has tried to do is, I'm sure that we've unintentionally created some harm along the way. And I pray that that's a very minimal amount. But our perspective is that really to alleviate poverty, material poverty, you first have to look at how people are relating to themselves, to others in their community, to their work, and to God, in our opinion. And if you can look at those relationships and help reconcile people into right relationship with how they view themselves as a person of worth and value, to integrate them into a community of people that love and support them, give them meaningful work that allows them to use their skills to be productive and to be prosperous, and to have a right relationship with how they view God, then I think you can really position yourself well to address material problems that exist in communities.
Yeah. So if I was to summarize that, so tell me if I'm wrong. Okay, I probably am. Probably way off on this.
Give it a shot.
So it sounds like in the U.S. we tend to think of poverty as material goods. You've reframed it in a nice way. You said it's almost like you're lacking, not necessarily material goods, but you might be lacking in your relationship with God. You might be lacking in your relationship with the community.
There is a gap, and it is a lacking of something, but it's not necessarily just lacking of food or lacking of clothes or lacking of shelter. And it's probably a podcast in and of itself to talk about how to think about poverty. And then all of those things are about the individual person, but they still live inside of a very broken system of a social system, political system, economic system. So there are a lot of factors that affect how you should address somebody's need. And I think sometimes we move quickly past that point and we don't understand those dynamics, and we don't take the time to understand how is our intervention here going to affect this person or this community. And that was step one. I mean, and then obviously beyond that is actually then creating a plan and a vision for, what is this organization called Care for AIDS going to do? What are we going to accomplish? And what is it going to take us to do that? And then we moved on from there.
So what I love is, we're going to get into actually building this thing. But I love in that first step, I think you've already given us a life hack. I mean, we're going to get to a life hack, but you already basically have told us in a very wise way, your first step is just be fully present. Just listen and be fully present.
Yeah.
Get to know the people and the system and the relationships before you jump in and start doing stuff.
Yeah.
And then once you have a good sense of that, then it's time to figure out how you can insert yourself in a way that's going to make their lives better. And I think what you're giving us, and I didn't intend this for the show, but what you're giving us is a nice way to live life. Not only if we're leading a nonprofit or wanting to support nonprofits, but even as people.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's time for break. We're going to move into break. When we come back, we'll talk more about, now how do you set the vision and build that? And then we'll talk about some of the challenges of leading a nonprofit and challenges of that space. Yeah. And then how can we as listeners begin to kind of support you further in your mission. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. This is Brandon Smith. Happy holidays and Merry Christmas. It is the season of family and hopefully not family dysfunction. And it's also that time of year that if you're anything like me, you're planning for the next year. You're thinking about how can I set next year up to be really, really awesome? Well, I want to help you with that. If you haven't downloaded one of my workbooks on workplace happiness, I'm going to offer a special gift to all my listeners that if you download one of those books, use the promotional code New Year, all one word, New Year, either uppercase or lowercase, and you can receive over 50% off any of my 3 workbooks. So whether you're looking for the right job, you could download that workbook, or the right culture, or the right boss. All of them, the promo code will work. So consider that my gift to you as you get ready for the new year, and let's make this next year, 2018, a great one. This is the Brandon Smith Show. Welcome back from the break. And of course, today we are talking about the world of nonprofits, both in terms of what it's like to be in that world and how to really make a difference and impact with those in need, but also what can we be doing to give and support that better. So my guest is Justin Miller, CEO of Care for AIDS, and Justin's been talking a little bit about his journey of building Care for AIDS. And when we kind of last left our heroes in this story, we talked a little about kind of the step one, going in there and really understanding the need, being fully present. Now we're starting to pivot to step two, which is kind of setting that vision. So talk to us a little bit about how you set that vision, and then we can kind of quickly kind of speed up through some of the challenges that you've encountered along the way, because I know, just like any startup, it couldn't have been, I mean, maybe it was smooth sailing, but usually it's not.
It's not.
So what was that like, the whole visioning process for you?
Well, I don't take for granted that I had two partners in this that were Kenyan nationals, and I can't stress enough that if you're trying to do this across oceans, you've got to have those kind of trusted partners in that part of the world. And I could not have gone past this point at Care for AIDS if it had not been for Cornell and Duncan. And so the vision was really one that we discussed and birthed together as a collective of leaders. And it was really taken from that need that existed. We saw a gap, and we created a vision to try to fill that gap. And at the time it was, and it shifted a little bit, but basically it was intervening in the lives of HIV positive parents so that we could give them 25 to 30 years back on their life so they could be the ones to raise and educate their children. And we created then from that vision a model and a strategy that we thought would address that. But I say thought would address that because the next step in this process was, at least on the Kenyan side of things, was actually to pilot this and to test our assumptions. And and I think that's maybe understood by some people in a for-profit context. I mean, you want to prototype something or pilot something, but it's just as important in our context as well. And we ran our first program for about a year, and it was by most standards a failure. We messed up a ton of things, and some of our assumptions did not prove true, but it really took us only one really failed pilot to understand what would be successful. And the second time we launched a program, it was extremely successful. And we've largely been doing that same work for the past 10 years based on what we learned from that first pilot. And so that was happening in Kenya. And in the meantime, I was trying to start to build some interest, build a board of directors, which is obviously required if you want to operate a nonprofit. I was trying to build what was the beginning of our donor support to support what we're doing in Kenya. And so all of these things are happening, and it's a pretty crazy time, but we just continued to take little steps forward towards that, and we've been pretty much doing that for the past 10 years.
So I'm really curious, in that first pilot that you went through, that first year, and you said, okay, we learned a lot, didn't work out the way we wanted it to. What did you learn? What was the thing that you found was, oh yeah, we tried this assumption was not quite right, we had to make an adjustment?
Well, I mean, just one example was we decided part of our program was going to be training people on some vocation or skill that they could use to provide for their family. But obviously access to capital was a big problem in this context. And so we trained our clients, we coached them on creating business plans, we reviewed those business plans, and we gave loans to a portion of our clients who we thought qualified for those loans. Unfortunately, we underestimated really the higher value of really preserving that community within those 80 clients that were in our program. And we created a division in that class that we paid a high price for because we were in the training business, but we were also in the funding business. And we learned very quickly that those two don't exist well in the same place. And there was a division and resentment that happened, and a lot of negative feedback for our organization because we only loaned money to 40 people instead of the full 80. So just those kind of things that we didn't anticipate, but they came back and they really hurt the program. So we were able to make an adjustment and move on.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
So now when you think about some of the challenges you had over the years, and by the way, we haven't mentioned this yet, but along this whole journey, not like you, of course you had so much free time, you went back and you got an MBA from Emory.
Did.
And so you were trying to pick up that lens, I'm imagine, of, okay, what can I learn from the business world to apply in this context?
That's right.
So what were some of the challenges that you've encountered along the way, and even today, that would be helpful for people to be aware of in the nonprofit space?
Well, I think it's interesting you mentioned the for-profit lens, because I think I do look at our work that way a lot now. Are we, a lot of times nonprofits are not thought of as being very good at understanding their outcomes very well. And maybe we don't manage performance as well as some people think we should. And so it's really interesting to look at those two lenses. And there's one particular issue, and I'll share a couple things that I've learned underneath this, but I think there's something that makes nonprofits very unique, and it's maybe one of our greatest advantages or assets, but it's also maybe one of the things that is most challenging for us. And I think it's the passion and the high levels of emotional investment that people have in the work that they do with Care for AIDS or any nonprofit. We actually have a staff covenant that we have some behaviors that we've outlined for our staff that we want them to embody. And there's one in there that we actually borrowed from North Point Community Church, and it's take it personally. And a lot of people would think of that as a negative thing, like you should not take your work personally. But we think it's something that's so important for us. But we also have kind of a corollary to that statement that says we want our people to stay healthy. And I think that in the nonprofit space, you get the buy-in, you get the ownership, you get the engagement of people who want to see the cause succeed. You also get the fact that you don't set a lot of good boundaries and people burn out, or the leader is only relying on the passion for the cause to drive their people, and they don't look at really how they're engaging the people that they're leading. And they're often doing that on asking them to take a lesser salary than what would even be acceptable by our standards. And so it's this interesting dichotomy of how do you encourage people to take the work personally and carry that mission and passion with them, but create an environment in the workplace that will retain and develop great talent, because a lot of talent leaves the nonprofit space, and our clients deserve the best talent, and we need to do the best job we can at attracting and developing and retaining that talent.
So I'm ready to ask questions because this is a part that I'm so intrigued by. It's one of those puzzles that I've been trying to solve for years, not quite been able to get there, because nonprofit space can be such a messy space because it is such an emotional place, both in terms of the emotional drain, because you're exposed to, sometimes I've heard people say, depending upon the kind of nonprofit, you see the worst side of humanity. In terms of how people treat other people or other creatures. And so you get that element of it. People who are in it because of the passion, and the mission, and so they're very passionate. They're taking less pay, but it can mean people, because of that wanting to rescue and save so many people, the boundary issue can cause issues.
Yes.
So from a management perspective, it can be really hard. When I get brought into a nonprofit, almost always someone has just gone to the hospital because they've overworked themselves to a point of hospitalization.
Yeah.
I had a lunch with a minister. This was some years ago, and he said, yeah, there's almost this mindset inside even churches where it's like whoever works the longest hours is loved most by Jesus. Yeah. It's like there's this.
Well, it's this badge of honor, and there's the response. Yeah. You feel like there's lives on the line.
Yeah.
And when you take that on yourself and say that it's my job to save them, or less time spent here at work means that more people will not receive care, it just creates this very dangerous place.
Yeah, I did an offsite for Fur Kids. They're a rescue shelter here in the kind of metro Atlanta area, no-kill animal shelter, one of the largest in the Southeast. And one of the individuals said, we talked about boundaries, and she said, when we say no, animals die. There's a direct line. And that's the hard thing about saying no. Yeah. So here's the, I don't know if it's $1 million question, $1 billion question. How do you navigate that? How do you bottle that passion and use that passion?
Yeah.
Oh, and one more thing that I've also found, that when you try and give performance feedback to people,
then
they do take it really personally. They're like, you are questioning my, my commitment, my professionalism, my dedication, whatever happens to be.
Absolutely.
When you're saying, no, I'm just wanting you to improve this one little thing.
Right. That's part of it. And then also, I think sometimes we might project, we want the things that we want to be true for the people that we serve, this compassion, this grace. We feel like sometimes I think we have to project that onto the people that we lead on our teams as well. And And maybe there's something there that says like, oh, we're not supposed to be a place that has these high expectations or high accountability. And so sometimes we're just not good at really addressing the hard topics on our teams and dealing with feedback and performance and accountability the way that we should. And I think we confuse the program side of thing and the personnel side of thing and realize that those two things have to be dealt with very differently. So
have you found a way to move the needle on that? No, I mean, I'm not saying you have to get it perfect, but have you found a way to kind of get people more comfortable with that or move the needle?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of this it requires the leader to think about how he or she is talking about this thing in the workplace, and he or she has to model it for his people. And I don't say I always get this right, but the leader has to be the one that has really strong boundaries. And you can't always be focusing just on the desperation. You have to talk to people about hope. And I think that's one thing we get right in nonprofits is that we have a little bit fewer levers to pull to kind of motivate people and engage people. So we have to be really good at casting vision and moving donors and volunteers and your staff to stay connected. So a lot of it is how I'm communicating, hope in our work. A lot of it is how I'm setting boundaries in my own life, trying to make it part of our practice not to overwork or stay late or work weekends, because I want our people to be healthy and stay the course. And then I don't want to just lean on passion alone and hope that will carry people indefinitely. We try to create a culture that is focused on continued development and giving our people new challenges and helping them grow, going back to school and paying them maybe not equal wage to what they would get in the for-profit sector, but a livable wage where they feel comfortable. They don't feel stressed about their financial situation while they're also trying to do this work. So there's a lot of things that we try to do to make sure we have a place that people can really be healthy and they can stay for the long run. And thankfully, we've retained great talent over the years.
You're like an energy and emotional manager.
Yes,
you
absolutely.
You got to figure out like when to really push the pedal down on passion and hope, and when to pull it back, and when to kind of manage boundaries and make sure people aren't getting burned out.
Yeah, and what makes it even more complicated, as you know this, and the listeners do too, is that every single person on your team requires a different type of feedback style, management style, energy style. I only have 3 people on my team right now full-time in Atlanta, and they could not be any more different in how they need to be led. So that takes just a high level of knowledge and emotional intelligence about your people to know what they need.
And you've also got 2 little ones at home, don't you?
I do.
What are their age?
A 3-year-old and a 3-week-old.
So you've already gotten a crash course into parenting with all the different personalities and how you gotta lead people and parent people a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
So we're really getting ripe here to the window on time. So what I want to do here is I want to ask kind of 2 final questions. One is when you're thinking about people listening right now who want to give. They're thinking about, I want to give to nonprofits. I want to support nonprofits. What are some tips or advice you can give them? And then we'll get to our life hack question.
Yeah. Man, I love this question. I could spend so much time talking about it. But first of all, I mean, I think the way that we've always evaluated nonprofits has been about how much of their money do they spend on programs. I would just encourage people to look deeper into what is the actual impact that they're creating. I mean, we want nonprofits that are creating good outcomes, not just that are spending a lot of money on programs. So really, I mean, becoming an educated giver is really important. And I hope people would take the same care in how they steward their investments as they do in stewarding how they're giving money to things, because this is a really important topic. I also like to challenge people to think about their portfolio of giving as they would their investments, to not just think about these issues that are here in our backyard, but think about these global issues. Only 6% of what is given into charity is going internationally, 94% staying domestically. My wife and I like to look at what we're giving into our city, what we're giving into our state, into our country, and into our world. And we try to give our time, talents, and treasures in a way that will match those different spheres of influence. So just, I would say this is the time of year, be very intentional about giving. I would hope that everyone listening, if they haven't already, I hope you would have an experience where you giving to a nonprofit or to a church is a joyful experience, because that's what it should be. It's not something that should be done out of just guilt or obligation. But if you are partnering with an organization that's doing great work around the world, it should be an experience that's joy-filled. And I hope you will look for organizations and partner with organizations, not just your money, but other aspects of your life as well, to serve them.
I like that. Much more discernment goes into it from what I'm hearing from you. Don't just give it to just feel better for the moment or relieve guilt, but really think about the impact and then think about your communities and your country and the world. Really kind of think about it from those different perspectives.
Yeah.
So I ask every guest this question. One life hack you've got for us on how we can eliminate or prevent dysfunction in our life, personally or professionally?
Well, I think in the spirit of giving, this might be an unusual one, but I think that everyone should look into having what they call a donor advised fund. It is not just for people with tons of wealth or money to give, but it is a fund that you put money into, you receive a tax deduction for, and you're able to disperse that money at any time that you want to the nonprofits of your choosing. But all of your giving happens from the same place, and you get one receipt at the end of the year, and it makes giving easy, seamless. You don't have 10 or 12 different receipts, and then that money, while it's in that account, is also going to be accruing interest until you decide where you want to give that. So, there's so many different banks offer donor advised funds. There's one here in town called National Christian Foundation. And I think even if you're giving, $500 a year, $1,000 a year, or $100,000 a year, I think having a fund like that, a donor advised fund, is something that will help you give more and will enjoy the giving process more.
Awesome. I love it. Justin, thank you. Thank you for not only coming on the show, but thank you for all the great work you're doing in the world.
Thank you.
So if people want to learn more about Care for AIDS and what you guys are up to and find out ways to support you more, or even learn more about you, where can they go?
Well, just go to our website, careforaids.org. And on that site, you can connect with us on social media. You can get our blog. You can find out ways that you can come to Kenya with us on a trip. You can partner with us by giving, whatever it is how you want to engage with us. And then I have a site as well called justintmiller.com. And this is basically 10 years in the making of just all of this knowledge that we've learned from starting, scaling and sustaining a nonprofit. And we've tried to put some resources there for those people who want to do something similar. So please check that out.
So people can learn not only how to support you all and what you're doing, but even learn how you went down this path and journey and learn from that as well.
Yeah, we'd love others to be successful in doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, world needs more of it.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. And of course, join us every week as we launch a new Brandon Smith show every Sunday evening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. And until our next show, of course, you can follow us on facebook.com/Brandon Smith WPT for Workplace Therapists, and on iTunes, if you're not already listening to this, at The Brandon Smith Show. And until next week, have a great week and an awesome life. Talk to y'all next week.